Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unleashed with me, Scarlett Johnson, presented by Moms for Liberty. And today I am joined by my friend Daniel Buck. You're a man wear many hats. You're senior editor and writer at National Review, a research fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, director at the Center of Education Reform, Conservative Education Reform Caucus. Am I getting everything right? You're a former principal, teacher, lot of things. And you just recently came to speak to Moms for Liberty Wisconsin at our state legislative event. And you did a great job. You gave a great presentation about a topic that I want to discuss a little bit more fully here. So thanks for joining.
The only thing I'll say is I write for National Review a lot. They're my favorite publication to write for, my favorite magazine, but I am not a senior editor there. I'm just kind of a contributor, a freelance contributor.
You'll be that wish casting, like putting forward. But yeah, I read your articles and follow you closely on X, and I'll put more of that in comments because you always have great stuff on X. So for Moms for Liberty, it's really within our mission because you talk about education, empowering parents, and helping parents navigate some very muddy, tricky waters right now. There's just so much going on in education. It's weird because there's so many things going on and so much technology, and yet in many ways education has not changed a whole lot in 100 years. There's many things that are just still the same and they should probably change, and then there's other changes that are happening really fast and maybe too fast, like AI in education.
Yeah, I'm actually a bit of a Luddite and kind of old-fashioned when it comes to education. You go back through education history. I think it was 1841, a guy, Josiah Bumstead, made the declaration that basically the blackboard was going to change everything. It was going to revolutionize everything. Einstein said it about the radio. It was said about TVs. It was said about cell phones. It was said about one-to-one computing. Basically, every technological innovation, there have been promoters that have said, this is going to revolutionize everything. We're going to enter a brave new world and educational utopia, and it never comes around. So I'm actually really skeptical of all of the tech boosters who are saying, oh, these LLM, these chatbots, these individualized AI tutors, you can learn. There's Mr. Beast said the other day that you can learn advanced topics in 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
I call BS, just because
really?
that's, huh?
I know, really, like you could advance topics in 20 minutes. I don't think so.
Yeah, no, people have been making these predictions for 150 years, 200 years. I'll believe it when I see it. And most of the people who are trying to sell you the latest tech tool are in the tech industry, or they're consultants that, there's the Latin phrase cui bono, who benefits. They want you to buy their product. But I'm a big fan of old-fashioned paper, pencil, get real books in kids' hands. So I'm actually, when it comes to education, that Mr. Beast clip that kind of did its rounds, at least it went viral in education Twitter. I'm sitting here like, I actually want to go back to education like it was 150 years ago. I want to give a kid a hard copy book and have him write a response to it by hand. So the exact opposite of much of the kind of trend and push and faddishness in education right now.
Well, even education 150 years ago, that would be more like homeschooling or pod schooling now, because they were small classrooms. We all watched. I grew up watching Little House on the Prairie. The little schoolhouse. In Wisconsin, we've got Old World Wisconsin, where you can go visit that first schoolhouse where there would be 30 kids of all ages in there, and when I was last there with my own kids and I saw the rigor, what kids were studying, it's actually kind of shocking because it was very advanced. And I think we think, oh man, back in the old timey days where they didn't know as much as we do now. Well, read the correspondence between folks, like the wording, the eloquence, the vocabulary, the cultural background that people had, the literacy, I think it's pretty sad compared to what your typical American, the vocabulary now, their ability to write, if your kids can write a paragraph, which is very iffy, even when they graduate high school. I have seen, I've seen things where there's no thesis. They can't comprise a paragraph, much less an essay.
Yeah, I have to be a little bit careful with the comparisons to 150 years ago because most of the correspondence that we have are from, the graduates who would have been, everyone didn't go to high school, so it would have been kind of the most elite families that are writing, my dearest Martha, those kinds of things to each other. But if there's any hope that I have, you saw me looking over maybe when you were talking. There it is. I have a whole book about one-room schoolhouses in Wisconsin sitting on a shelf, and I was trying to find it. But if there's any hope that I have for tech and ed, it is its ability to kind of democratize a more advanced education. What I mean by that is more people are going to have access to that homeschooling or to the small private schools. Even 20 years ago, you wanted to homeschool. Where do you get the curriculum? Where do you find your community? There's all of these questions. You just don't have access to resources. So if there is, where I see the benefit to tech in education, it is the access that people have to high quality resources to make that kind of old school classical education more accessible. You don't have to cough up $40,000 to send your kid to the hoity-toity bougie school in the area. Or you don't have to spend 80 hours as a homeschooling mom or dad trying to figure out in lesson plan. You can find good stuff online. You can find communities much, much more easily.
Yeah, and the hoity-toity bougie school that you're spending a lot of money on, your kids will get a good education. It'll be a very woke education, though. They will come out BML activists protesting ICE because that's the price to pay. Like, we're going to educate your kids, and we're also going to make sure that they are radical progressives as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've even there's local here. There's an all-girls Catholic high school that I had to pull my own daughter out of because I could not believe I'm like, if I could get this, actually my local public high school would not indoctrinate to the level that they were trying to in this school. So
Yeah, and even outside of the kind of fringy politics of it, for my own kids, I think they're younger than yours. They're 1 and a few days away from 5. Even my own kids, looking at private Christian schools, they didn't go all in for the wokeness. One that I toured, I won't name names right now because I'm not trying to push them in front of a media bus. But there was a lot of the social emotional learning. There's a lot of messages at a Christian school. Just you be you and follow your passions. And, maybe you're into that. But as kind of a dogmatic Christian, that's not the message I'm trying to send my kids. I'm trying to send my kids, be like God wants you to be. Do what the Bible says to do. So even a lot of Christian schools or private schools will buy into a secular humanism, not the full fringy progressive activist worldview, but they just the median doesn't think too much about it, secular humanism of America right now, which might be fine. If that's what you believe, okay. That's not what's in public schools, but even Christian schools you got to be careful. And you got to go tour, you got to visit, you got to watch and see what your kids are learning.
yes, you have to ask a lot of questions. The school that my youngest is in, we found a good school. I think we are about to find a good high school, but it's been a lot of tours and asking a lot of questions, and we're gonna have to drive it's a lot of driving too, but it's worth it at the end. But this kind of falls into an article that you wrote, and you said this might be one of the best articles that you've ever written, Teachers as Cultural Stewards, and that was in National Affairs. So kind of, because what you're saying is you could go to a private Christian school and discover that some of the social emotional learning or some of the content that you were opposed to in the public school is there. And is that because of teachers and the way that they are educated?
Yeah, I've long argued that the biggest, maybe I just keep talking, that the
Oh, no,
biggest,
yeah, you can keep talking. I'm
all
just
right, great.
putting you on solo. It looks good with the,
Oh, I see. I understand.
yes,
I thought I lost you for a
no,
second. Okay.
no, no.
I've long said that the biggest problem in education is a personnel problem. You know, there's the saying that personnel is policy, and that's absolutely the case in education too. The schools of education, the teacher prep programs that teachers go to are kind of the wokest of the woke. You know, where did the idea of microaggressions come from? Schools of education. What is Robin DeAngelis, the white fragility lady? What is she a professor of? She's a professor in a school of education. All of these so-called woke ideas or fringy progressive ideas, they come from the schools of education, the teacher prep programs. I'm reviewing a bunch of their syllabi right now, and you would not believe the readings and the videos that are assigned to prospective teachers. Or you think, okay, a teacher's going to a teacher prep program, what are they learning? Classroom management, how to give a good, model a good lesson, how to write a good quiz. They're reading a guide for white women who teach black boys. There's a video on disability justice that says, in order to have effective special education, you're like, okay, teaching kids with special needs, good topic. And then where does it go to? We need to deconstruct our capitalist patriarchy and foment a Marxist revolution. That's the reading on special education. I could keep going. Queering the curriculum is a common topic. If this is where teachers are going to train, even like the moderates compared to that are going to be pretty fringe. A moderate compared to Trotsky does not a moderate make.
I know you talk about a 1969 book, Teaching as a Subversive Activity by Neil Postman and co-author Charles Weingartner. I mean, this is 1969. So teaching as a subversive activity, meaning that it's a way for, here's a quote, the essential function of the schools in today's world is to develop in students a crap detector so that they can question everything. What is that supposed to mean?
So that's I'm using that as an introduction to this theory of education called critical pedagogy. Right? We're not trying to teach kids true things. We're not trying to teach them science or history or how to do math. We're not trying to develop in them virtuous characters. The only goal of education should be subversion, cynicism, deconstructing all norms, be they gender norms, family norms, American norms, American culture, Western ideals of equality before the law. The goal should be creating in students a crap detector, meaning calling BS on all of that stuff. We want our kids to,
that Americanism. When you see the US hockey team waving the American flag, call BS on that.
Yeah, and you notice they never say you should also direct that crap detector at what I'm telling you, at my ideas or at my own cynicism, but it's only at the West. And we want our kids to be critical, to not believe everything that they hear. But I don't know. I don't need my 5-year-old. I don't want the purpose of her education to be becoming a cynic. I want her to read and write. I want her to learn to listen to the authorities, to obey mom and dad and their teacher. When they're 18, when she's 22, when she's 30, at some point, I know she's going to look at me and say, Dad, I don't agree with you. I'm going to do something else. And when she's a fully functioning adult, yes, I want her to make her own decisions. But the goal of teaching kindergartners shouldn't be cynicism. Let's read them a Dr. Seuss book. Why are we doing this when they're 5?
Well, I'm just looking because there was a study that came out and I'm waving it in front of my own children, like, see, I told you so, because it's about the permissive parent, that the kind parent, the permissive parent research is coming back, and actually the kids are resentful and bitter. The parents don't like their children and they're bitter. This is something that I think luckily I intuitively knew. I was a young parent, but I had strict parents, and I am a strict parent. I'm not overly, crazy, but I'm pretty strict. And when my kids would say, "Mom, why are you the worst parent in the whole world?" and my friends get to do this, I would just say, "Well, I guess your friends' parents don't love them as much as I love you, because I'm here to protect you and I'm going to do my job. And now give me your phone and you're grounded." And because I have some kids that are older, and they're grateful for it because they needed it. They learned as they grew into adulthood how much kids need those boundaries.
Yeah, we've lost the concept of tough love. That true love of your own children, of whoever, a friend, your spouse, isn't always giving them what they want. I mean, in the most destructive individuals, right? They want another bottle of alcohol. They want to go back to the casino or whatever it is, right? Tough love is sitting that person down and saying, "You have a problem. You need to fix this. No, I'm not going to give you what you want right now." It's the same thing on a much smaller, more innocent scale with children. They're like, the world is scary. The world is confusing. They don't know up from down. They don't know they don't know what is going on outside of the four walls of their own house. They crave boundaries. They crave guidance. When I was a teacher, if I had, most of the year, my kids had assigned seats. They were in rows. But if I had a really good class, at the end of the year, for like the last couple of weeks, I'd let them pick their own spots. And what would the kids do? They'd come in the first day, they'd pick a spot, and then until the end of the year, they sat in that exact same spot. They didn't change it up every single day. They would kind of want to sit by their friends, but within that, they then created their own routine and their own structure and their own order, because they didn't want to come in and have that social anxiety of, who am I going to sit next to? Does this person, the person that, like, they don't want that. It's too much anxiety. They want to be told, "You sit here, that's your assigned seat," because it's comfortable. And they can walk in and they know what to expect every single day. There's enough uncertainty in the lives of children. Create boundaries for them. These are like boundaries, order, authority. These aren't dirty words. These are good for kids. And that study that you're referencing from the Institute of Family Studies, Brad Wilcox, he's a colleague of mine at AEI too, oh my gosh, it's so good. It basically found that all of the boundaries that parents set, bedtime, screen time, not having, overnight stays and like multi-gender sleepovers, bi-gender sleepovers, like all of the things that these strict parents are just, they're party kills, they're no fun. It correlates with better relationships with parents in the long run. Kids appreciate this in the long run. In the moment, they say, "Rah," and they pitch a fit, but then they're better behaved, they're more controlled, they're more in control of themselves and their emotions. They have a healthier relationship with their parents. Like, it's good for kids.
Yes. I mean, if you've had kids, you have to have the routines. They eat at this time, they sleep at this time. And when, of course, there's occasion when you have to upset those routines. And when you do, there's a price to pay. It's like, "Oh, I'm going to pay a price for this." And that doesn't change as they get older. They need, they crave, they want to be told no. There's some part of them that wants that. And you have to say, like, "Here's your curfew. Here, I'm going to take your phone. I'm not going to let you do this. There's a certain standard you have to have for your grades. And if you don't, there's consequences. You have to get a job." All of these things, and it's hard. And that was what the study said. Doing the hard things pays off in the end, but they are hard because you especially, like, you don't want to be that person, but you have to be. And when you are, as your kids go into adulthood, that's when you get to be friends with your kids again, but not when they're in high school. They will not. If you are BFFs with your kid in high school, check. I'm sorry to say this, but you're probably doing something wrong and you need to re-examine things, because unless that's one in a million, Your kids, even really good kids, need boundaries, and they need you to be their mom and their dad, not their friend.
Yeah, you have to be willing to be the bad guy
Mhm.
sometimes, but you know it's good for them in the long run. And I
In a
think,
good marriage, you do the good cop, bad cop. Sometimes, like,
yeah,
you naturally fall in. Sometimes my husband's the good cop, I'm the bad cop. You kind of play.
yeah,
That's what's nice about having two parents in the household, if you can possibly do it. That's the best, most ideal situation. It's not to condemn anything else, but you want to set families up for success and kids up for success, and that's the best
I
way.
think people just aren't accustomed to it. Especially, I'm going to bring it back to education. When I was a young teacher, one of the first times I really had to like crack down on a student. I don't remember if I had to give her a 0 or keep her in for lunch detention or what it was. We'll just say it was a 0, just for the sake of the story. Came up to me just sobbing beside herself. I think she had failed to study for a test or turned in something late. You can't do this. My parents are going to be so upset. And I felt awful in the moment. There's this little, I think she was like a 6th grade girl, had never gotten an F before, um, beside herself. Comes back the next day, is chipper. And, next time the test comes around, what did she do? She studied really hard for it
Yep.
and like turned out the better for it. She learned a lesson in that moment. If I don't, study, if I don't have good habits, I'm going to get a bad outcome. So what's the lesson? Do better next time. And she did do better next time. Like, I had to be the bad guy in that moment to be the good guy in the long run.
So I think at the end of this family research studies had said strict bedtime, strict screen time limits, homework time. It's not revolutionary. It's maybe kicking it old school, but that's what we need to do. That's what will help your child be a better student and I think a better adult when they get out of school, and because they're at some point going to have to set these limits for themselves. And imagine you've never made them do that. So now all of a sudden they're out on their own in college or in the world, and they're floundering.
Yeah. And I think where things like gentle parenting err is having them set those boundaries themselves too early.
Mhm.
There comes a point I could
That's a
see
good
with my
point.
children when they're a senior in high school and saying, hey, you're going to have to figure this out when you go off to college or go get a job next year or go into the military. If military, then they'll be setting their own boundaries for them. But, many of these options, you're going to have to start to set these own boundaries. So you're 18, let's sit down and talk and figure this out, because you're
Yeah.
going to have to do this eventually. But I'm not going to do that with a 5-year-old. She has no idea, oh, if I stay up late today, I'm going to feel like junk tomorrow. She can't think 10 minutes ahead. Any time longer than 10 minutes just doesn't make sense in her brain. She doesn't have the cognitive capacity, the ability for abstract thinking to have that discussion or think through that competently. So I'm not going to sit down with a 5-year-old and be like, what do you want to have for dinner? When do you want to go to bed? When they're 5, we say, this is what mom made, you're eating it. You are going to bed at this time. And in the moment, those boundaries are hard to set, but in the long run, they make things much, much easier. I'll give an example. My wife, love her dearly. Early on, I don't remember how old my daughter was. She set the boundary that she had to eat in a certain amount in a meal, and then before she got up, say, please may I be excused. And I wasn't from a family that did that, so I didn't get it. And there was one time where my wife had to enforce that rule very early on. Daughter didn't want to say it, didn't want to say it, didn't want to say it. And I was like, what are we doing this for? Just let her get down. I was the lenient one. I was playing the permissive parent in this scenario. Finally, my daughter goes, fine. Takes 3 bites of food. Please may I be excused? Yes, you may. Gets up, goes and plays. And she had been, sideways on her chair, pitching a fit. But I saw it was all crocodile tears because she shut it down immediately. It wasn't like we had to calm her back down. She finally just went, realized her act wasn't going to work, got up and moved. And now when we're out we're out at dinner, we're at a friend's house, our kids are behaved. I had a friend who said, to me, we didn't take our family out to dinner for like years when our kids were young because the kids were too crazy. Or I'll be at like a function and other people's kids are running circles and crawling under the table, and my kids are sitting there. I don't even have to tell them to behave. They kind of look askance at these other kids and like, what are they doing? Like, we got food. It's good food. Let's eat the food. Same thing with bedtime, or like screen time. My kids, my wife is reading that. I keep bringing up my wife, but we're talking about parenting, and it's
Yes,
we're
yes,
both parenting.
yes.
She's reading this Jonathan Haidt book right now, and he recommends less than an hour of screens a day, less than 3 hours of screens a day on the weekend. And we're like, our kids probably they maybe watch an hour of TV a week, and it's because we watch like a Disney movie with them every other week because it's a good family function to do. Sit down, pull out the popcorn, and watch Frozen or Moana or whatever it is. And there are times where not giving the kids screens is hard. When we go out to dinner, they don't sit on their phones. When we go on long car rides, we don't give them screens. We give them books, we sing songs, we talk with them, we listen to music, whatever it is. We don't give our kids screens. And it requires more parenting in those moments because I have to be actively involved with my kids
Yes.
and engaging them and telling them no, like, no, you can't throw your fork across the restaurant. Do that again. And I'm going to take you outside for a second. But then, I was doing a podcast the other day when my daughter was homesick. And what did she do for an hour? She sat with a book and flipped through and looked at the pages. She's 5. She can't read fluently right now, but she can sit and entertain herself for an extended period of time at 5 because she hasn't had her brain fried by a cell phone and the algorithm. All right,
Yeah.
stepping off my soapbox.
No, it's pretty scary what the studies are showing and how the screen time is rewiring kids' brains. And I think for a lot of parents, they're now saying, I'm waiting a lot longer to get my kid a phone. But I know when these phones first came out, you thought, oh, well, now when my kid has practice, they can call me, I can get a hold of them. And I didn't think much about giving my son in 7th grade an iPhone, like getting him a basic iPhone, and now he can contact me. And I just wasn't aware of the world that was open up to him, and it was convenient for me. And now I think there's a lot more information for parents, but it's really hard because I'll tell you, as they become teenagers, they'll feel very disconnected from their friend groups, and that's what they'll tell you, like, I am so disconnected. I don't know what's going on. I need to have my phone. So this is some of the stuff that parents navigate. Fortunately, there are some new phone devices that have the functions where they can make a call and they can text, but they cannot access the internet. They cannot access apps. And so that is a compromise. I know a lot of kids won't like it, but then you have sort of the functionality without the ability for them to at least surf the internet. But you're seeing, you're a researcher, that there's a lot of advisories for parents saying, hold off on those screens as long as possible.
Yeah. I get a lot of parents say to me, "Oh, I'll just wait till they're teenagers, then you'll see." But I was also told, when I have essentially no screens for my kids right now, again, unless we're sitting down and watching a movie together, and it's like a family activity. And even then, my wife and I decide when we're going to, not the children. Wait until you have a second kid or a third kid, and then you'll see, you just got to have Bluey or Paw Patrol or something to help pacify them when you're making dinner. But again, it's hard to make dinner when I can't just put my kid in front of an iPad, and I have to try and figure out a way to manage them and boil the pasta or whatever it is. So I haven't gone through that with preteens or teenagers, so I don't want to be like, haha, I'm going to figure it out. But it's just, all of the research shows that these screens and algorithms are terrible for kids. I do see the social difficulties that could cause. When I was a kid, we would talk in school and say, hey, let's go see this movie at this time. And we all just met up, and our parents miraculously then knew when to come pick us up too. We functioned without phones just fine. But if all of the social groups have phones, they're not going to function that way, right? They're
Yeah.
going to use the medium that they have to figure out, what are we doing today? Where are we meeting up? They're not gonna have those habits that you or I might have had when we were younger that said, hey, we all got to get home and then let's meet back up at the park and play on the jungle gym together.
Yeah.
They're not going to do that. They're going to text each other after the fact. So I'm definitely intrigued by these devices that allow, get a dumb phone, a flip phone for your kids so they can communicate with their friends, but they're not on Instagram developing, suicidal ideations, depressions, and anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. I just spoke with the CMO of Patriot Mobile, and he made me aware of this new type of phone. And I would, because I've got an 8th grader, she's about to go into high school. And yeah, like we don't want her to have, we finally caved in and got her a phone. And when I heard about that, I want to take that away and give her this other option, because I try and take the phone away. I'm trying to monitor it in all these different ways. And they're just smarter. They're just smarter than us at navigating through all of that stuff. And so I thought, well, I waited a long time because I waited till she was 14. But there are more and more parents that are even waiting longer. And for her, I know I'd given my kids phones much earlier. But what I would say to parents is, just because you did something before doesn't mean you have to replicate it. Because when I didn't know what I know now, and now I'm doing something different. So I'm glad to see younger parents like yourself are really early on, you're making this commitment. And I think it's a good idea. And I don't think that parents who made different choices because maybe we didn't have the knowledge, or it was easier and we didn't know, but I'm not going to justify it. I think that it was a bad decision. I saw what happened to some of my kids through COVID. And when I had to take the devices away after they had already had them, it was much harder. It would have been so much easier if I just never let them have that access that I did beforehand.
Yeah. And I'm not blaming parents, even 5-10 years ago, who gave their kids a smartphone, because we just didn't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hope and promise about what, social media and cell phones were going to allow, or smartphones, not cell phones. It's kind of like a lot of people who smoked before we knew just how carcinogenic cigarettes and tobacco and all the chemicals in there were. It's like they didn't know. They were like, oh, it's a light stimulant. It's like a cup of coffee. Sure, maybe it yellows my teeth a bit, but that's worth the trade-off. It's social, et cetera, et cetera. And then we started to learn more and more and more and more. And then you saw smoking rates just kind of decline. And I think it's the same thing with phones, where we just didn't know 10 years ago. There were some people throwing out warnings, but there wasn't good social science proving this. It was all kind of speculative. And I
But
think
now
there was, yeah, now we know. And even if your kids already have smartphones, there are boundaries that you can set, right? If I'm worried about my daughter's social life, I can give her one of those dumb phones and say, all right, you can have it for the hour after school to message, keep in touch with your friends. And then you put it away and you go outside until dinner. You get to check it for 10 minutes before bed, not before bed, after dinner, put it back away, and then it's gone for the night. Don't take it into your room. You're not using it as your alarm clock, none of that stuff. Like, you can set boundaries and you can incentivize and require good habits too. It's not enough just to say no. You have to give them something else to do, go outside with them, engage them, play a game with them, have a family movie nights, like do other stuff with them, fill that absence and that gap with quality family time.
And be aware, because if you don't have teens already, I'll tell you, like, that it's not true what they're saying about their social life, because it's more likely that they are getting depressed and feeling anxiety because their friend, this constant communication with friends, these constant photos. It used to be that if you weren't invited to a party, you didn't know. Maybe you found out about it much. Now you know right away. and then they're sad and depressed, or there's bullying, there's teasing, there's so much. So I think that most likely they aren't missing out on anything other than I think a lot of stuff that's going to contribute to more anxiety, to eating disorders, to I have to look perfect, and looking at all, everything's in a filter. There's so many things that we have to just be aware of, and our kids just they just have to grow up more before they have a device like this. And so you've argued a lot for the removal of phones from classrooms and schools. Why have you been such an advocate for that?
A number of reasons. There's kind of the personal experience reason, where I was in schools that were permissive with cell phones. We kind of had rules, but the rules were we leave it up to teachers, and they could have it in the lunchroom. And it was just, I mean, Scarlett, when you were in high school, if you walked into the lunchroom, what would you have seen and heard?
A lot of noise, a lot of talk.
Noise. Yeah. A lot of talking, probably some food being thrown when the supervisor's back is turned. My friends and I, we'd take we'd take straws, and you could crunch up ice and shoot teeny bits of ice at people. Right? It's high school. We as adults need to crack down on kids for those things, and kids absolutely should be causing a bit of a ruckus. It's kind of the perpetual back and forth of mankind. It's a good thing. But at this school that allowed phones, you walk into the lunchroom and it wasn't silent, but it was kind of quiet. There was just like a dull murmur, because what were all the kids doing? They were all sitting at their lunch tables, necks craned down, staring at their phone, and the conversations were only, look at this, and it'd be like a TikTok video that they were showing, or a meme, and then they'd go back to their phone. And sometimes I would go into the lunchroom with like a deck of Uno cards or Jenga, and like sit down and get the kids to put their phones away and play some game, and they loved it. They had a great time. But if there wasn't an adult there pushing them to put their phones away, what are they going to do? They're just going to X, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever it is too addicting. That's what they're going to turn to. And then I was in schools that banned phones before I switched to doing policy work full time. I was at a classical school, and I was also at a private Catholic school where we were very strict about phones. There were no phones. We weren't going to see them bell to bell. We kind of knew the kids had them in their lockers or in their backpacks, but they didn't get them at lunchtime. They did not get them during class time. They did not get them in the hallway. And what were kids doing? They'd walk by, kids I didn't even know, like, hey, Mr. Buck, give me a high five. They were talking and a bit raucous in the lunchroom again. Out at recess, they were actually playing games. There was always a pickup game of kickball, tag, like whatever it was. The girls would get together and take like weeks to make their own dance routine. They weren't just standing, they were engaging together and having fun, doing what kids do when you give them playtime outside. They weren't just standing in a huddle scrolling, because we took the phones away. It was good for them. We gave them a reprieve, a break from these screens.
Yes.
Often now, if you go into schools kind of they push these, and they incentivize these screen addictions. I don't really blame teachers for this, but sometimes like you have problem kids, they're on their phone, and you let the kid go on the phone. Why? Because if the kid's on the phone, he's not causing a problem. So there's kind of these perverse incentives to let the kids have their phones, to just pull the Chromebooks out, and the kids who are going to be productive are going to do their work, and the kids who aren't going to be productive, instead of cussing you out, are going to be on, fungames.com, I don't know, whatever it is. They're going to bring up games on their computer and play those. So not only getting phones out of schools, I'm actually a big proponent of getting screens out of schools.
So that's a new one. So we'll talk about that. But I've chaperoned many 4 so far, 8th grade trips where the kids, we take all of the class, and these are small schools, so to DC. And as soon as they get off the plane and onto the bus, we go around and we collect the phones. And oh yes, they're oh my gosh, they're like, I can't live. And it's amazing what happens, because they all are talking and they're all paying attention, because before we had that policy, we noticed the kids weren't looking out the window at all of the sites. They weren't listening to the history. They weren't even talking to each other. We took the phones away for the entire trip. And sometimes as adults, we're like, it's too bad we have to give them back, because these kids finally have personalities, and they're talking, and they're fun, and I would see other groups where the entire class is just looking at their phone. They're in front of these
The
amazing
Lincoln
sites.
Memorial, and they're not even looking.
They're not even looking. They're just looking at their phone, and they're taking a picture. So they took a picture, and then they're done. And then they're just all sitting kind of hunched over, looking at the phone. And I think it's one of those things where our kids are almost craving for us to take this away, because it's like, my precious.
Yeah.
My precious. That's how kids treat their phones. My precious, I can't live without the ring.
I used to volunteer for camp ministry, and we would take the kids' phones away. And by the end of the week, the kids were reluctant to take them back, because they had finally experienced, sitting in a circle and talking with their friends without the distraction of a phone, and getting to know each other in a way that they don't when the screen's there. Having, I'm sure when you were a kid, you remember, like, for the first time really having a heart-to-heart with a friend and being like, wow, I didn't know I could do that with another person. That was awesome. Yeah. They'd never really had those kinds of conversations. They'd never gotten lost in thought. Yes. They'd never had the experience where they're bored, they sit down, and then they realize 20 minutes have passed, as they just kind of get distracted by nature or start thinking and then come back around. Like, they've never had that experience of being lost in thought. That's an experience that we are losing the idea of getting lost in thought.
Looking out the window, just looking out the window in a car ride, just thinking, thinking about things.
Yeah. So the kids didn't want the phones back. They eventually did take them back, and the whole bus ride home, they were on them and getting caught back up on their snaps and their streaks and whatnot. But they didn't want them. They didn't want them back at first. And in the classroom, the phones and in the lunchrooms and out at recess, it interrupts what I've written about before, both strong and weak tie relationships. So it interrupts strong tie relationships, which are your friends, your family members, your loved ones. If they're sitting at the lunch table, there's just the conversations that crop up about, whatever. You want to be buried or cremated? Like, dumb conversations like that. Or when I was in high school, we'd be like, who's cooler? Obi-Wan Kenobi or Master Chief, from the main character from Halo? And we just debate that for a whole lunch period. Those conversations don't come up in those strong tie. The would you rather questions. Those like bonding conversations don't come up as much, because everyone's looking at their phone. And then also, as important, maybe not as important, but also important, are what we call weak tie relationships, what sociologists call weak tie relationships. The people that, like, you're not close friends with them, but they're acquaintances. For adults, it might be your bartender or your barista, depending on what your preferred drink is. The person you say good morning to, they give you a sense of normalcy. They ask, oh, hey, how's, what's coming up at work? Like the polite little conversations. For students, it's the teachers that they haven't had. I never had, I won't say her name, because I don't need to bring up somebody in public that doesn't want to be brought up in public. But there are teachers whose names I can recall that I never had, but they knew my name. And I would say good morning to them. They'd greet me at the door every single day. They'd give me a high five in the hallway. The kids in high school that you don't really know much about them, but you were in school with them since kindergarten. And they're just like, man, we've been together. We've been in classes together since kindergarten. And it gives you a sense of normalcy. It gives you a sense of place in this world, that you belong somewhere. And phones interrupt those too, because you just don't have that network of loose associations either. Because what are you doing in the hallway? You're looking at your phone. What are you doing in lunchroom? You're looking at your phone. What are you doing on the bus when you're driving, like when you're being driven to school? You're looking at your phone.
Mm-hmm. So now let's get back to Chromebooks, because especially since the pandemic, kids don't have textbooks anymore. Like, I used to be able to sit and do homework with my kids with a textbook. Now I have to try to find the textbook online. All the homework is through the Google Classroom. Everything is Chromebook. And so for me as a parent, so I want to take screen times up, guys. Mom, I have to do my homework. And I can only do it on my Chromebook. Unless, and I have 5 kids, I have 3 at home. Unless I'm just sitting there looking right behind them, I don't know. They could easily slip right out and do something else and then slip right back in so that when I come in, they're on the homework. So it interrupts my ability to enforce our screen time rules because they have to study, they have homework. And so that's probably my biggest complaint as a parent, because I want to get them off these screens. Then they're telling me, Mom, I have to do my work and it's all here. There's nothing that's pen and paper. My youngest kids, their penmanship is atrocious because they don't write anymore. It's all through the computer. So how feasible is it to go back a little bit to pencil and paper and doing things the way we used to?
How feasible is it? I want to hope that it's very feasible. There's legislation in Oklahoma, is it, where lawmakers are trying to limit screen time to 1 hour for kindergartners, which is wild that the kids are on screens for more than that. There's a great Ed Week survey.
They're an iPad.
Yeah, there's an Education Week survey. I don't have the numbers. I haven't looked at it in a few months, so I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it's something like, 10% of students spend less than an hour on a screen in school. 75%, it's 1 to 4 hours a day in school looking at a screen. And then the final 25%, my math isn't mathing right now. I was an English teacher, not a math teacher. But it's something like 27%, I think it was, of students spend over 5 hours a day on a screen in schools. Yep. If you account for recess, lunch, and gym, that is all day. They are on a screen at school. It is bonkers, absolutely bonkers that we allow that. To your points, that then kind of compromises a parent's ability because it pushes screens into the home in a way that parents probably don't like. Yeah. So it's a parents' rights issue, and then it's also an academic issue. When I was teaching, I moved in the direction of doing more and more online, typing on Google Docs. Kids can't lose their essays. Turning things in on Google Classroom, it makes my life easier to sort through. But I started to look at the research, and then it was less convenient to do things off the computer. Kids lose their homework, have to hand things out. It's harder to keep organized with paper and pencil. But kids learn better when they write their notes by hand. Kids understand and comprehend and remember more when they read on a physical book. There's a lot of reasons for that, but paper and pencil generally is better. By the time I was done in schools, I still use computers for a few things. Final big essays, I want it typed up and handed in. Maybe there are people who are gonna, bicker with me about that. A school that I was at, students had to handwrite their final essay in cursive. Power to them. It's not the way the world works anymore. Most everything, like emails, typed. I'm a writer primarily. I'm not handwriting in cursive and mailing it into publications. I'm emailing it to people. While we're on this call, I got an email back from an editor about something that I typed up and sent in. So there were a few things that if you can't do it, on pen and paper, there are just some things that screens allow. There's like the Globe Theatre in England where Shakespeare performed his plays. Has like this online 360 degree, like you can bring students in there almost like Google Earth, and they can kind of like go around and look and see Globe Theatre, right? I'm not going to be able to bring my students in Podunk, Wisconsin, on $1,000 plane flight to go see the Globe Theatre, but we can do a 10-minute activity in class, hand out the Chromebooks for that moment, let them do it, answer some questions so I know they're actually doing it and not just kind of goofing off and doing what they want, and then close them and hand them back in. Right? There are discrete uses for Chromebooks that I can see. To all the way back to your question, is there hope that we're going to kind of get screens out of classrooms, I don't think we're going to completely, but I do think we can start to set boundaries, right? Kids in elementary school can't be longer than an hour. Homework cannot be online. They are kind of these, just like you can give your kid a smartphone if you already have, you can set boundaries with them. If we have Chromebooks in the school, we can start to set boundaries to keep them from being overused.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Like a hybrid system as they get older too, you know, because it was expected for me to type. I even on a typewriter, on an actual typewriter, we had to type our essays in then we had computers by the time I was at the end of high school, but I started high school and we had to still use typewriters in the typing room. And so to expect that is fine. And I think sort of a hybrid utilize some of the great things, like the really cool things that you can do in the classroom with this technology, but don't succumb to it completely. Now we get to AI in the classroom, which is a whole nother, it's a whole nother very big, I just kind of scary topic because of the ability for kids to cheat and to not actually learn. And like, what did Mr. B say? 20 minutes, learn complex. No, in 20 minutes, they can pretend like they've learned a complex topic without actually understanding it at all. But they could sound like they have, or they could copy paste and put the right answer, but that's not learning. That's regurgitating something someone else gave them.
Yeah,
It's a big issue.
I wrote a piece for this publication, Education Next, a few years ago, and kind of the cheating epidemic hadn't really taken off yet, or at least it hadn't showed up. And it's one of those the surveys from Stanford or Harvard hadn't found evidence yet, but we all knew what was going on. And I interviewed a few current students for this piece and asked them, what are students really doing? And their gist was like, anything that is online at this point, it's not done by the kid, right? The minute the teacher turns their back, I watch everyone's tabs open to Google or ChatGPT. And it is just, if it's done online and you're not actively monitoring what the kids are doing, they're cheating on it. There are some teachers who are figuring out ways to, assign homework. They might give a paper copy of a reading and they say, do this at home, read this at home. And then when you come in tomorrow, there's going to basically be, you're going to have a pop quiz, a handwritten pop quiz. So there's some accountability. The kids, if you give them, the Declaration of Independence or read the next chapter of Mice and Men or something, the kids might be able to go up and look up a summary still, or have ChatGPT give them a summary of it. But doing something then the next day that holds them accountable to actually have learned the material. There's still some ways you can try and assign homework without kids completely cheating on it. My worry with AI more so is honestly cognitive atrophy. I don't know if the last time or if you have watched WALL-E. I think of all the kind of famous dystopias, I think that one is the most realistic, where they're so accustomed to just being brought around on those little floating wheelchairs that they lose the ability to walk functionally. I'm worried that the more we offload our thinking to AI, teachers, parents, students are kind of going to lose the ability to think. So I have it's not published yet. I have a piece coming out that's even encouraging teachers to not use AI in their planning. Because what's a lot of the work of teaching? It's the thinking, it's the planning. If you're using AI to write an email about, a testy situation involving a student, why do those difficult emails sometimes take us, it seems like, a whole afternoon to write a short email? It's not because you're struggling to put words to paper. It's because you're struggling to figure out, what do I actually think about this? What is really going on? What can we do to try and fix this? What's going on in little Johnny's mind? How might the parent be thinking through this? How will they react if I say this versus that? There's a lot of thought work. I usually hate that phrase, thought work. It's just a justification for people who aren't doing anything productive to continue to justify their non-productivity. But there's thought work that goes into that. Planning a class. Why am I reading this book? what am I building towards for a final project? Can I structure my questions right now or incorporate vocab questions into my questions right now so it's going to help them with their final project that I'm assigning? Like, there's a lot of that thought work that you're going to start to lose if teachers offload their thinking to AI. Same thing with students. If we're having them interact with AI, I wrote a piece about it recently for the Fordham Institute. A lot of studies will say AI assisted learning is helping kids. Giving them ChatGPT is resulting in better outcomes. But if you dig into the research and the studies themselves, what's actually happening is if you let the kids, for example, use AI to help with their essays, the essays that they're writing with AI are better. Or if you let them take the math test with AI, their scores are better. But the minute you take that tool away, they actually do worse in the long run. They are worse at math. They are worse at writing. It's the same thing. Like if I gave a kid, a basic timed math test with a calculator, they're probably going to be more accurate than if they took it without. But that's not actually a measure of their learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they can do with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever isn't a measure of what they can actually do. It's a measure of what that tool can do. And in the long run, all it teaches them is to offload their thinking to that AI, and then they get their muscles get weaker in the long run. One more analogy, and then I'll be done. If I were to, lie back in a bench press, and I had, something from Boston Dynamics, one of these robots, help me pick it up, and I could bench press 700 pounds, I could go and say in some research paper, look, the outcomes are better. But if I'm doing that over time, I'm not actually lifting that, and I myself am going to get weaker. The more we offload and let our kids offload their thinking onto these AI platforms, it's going to make their mental muscles atrophy, just like if I were using robots during my workout.
Yeah, and like you said, you mentioned a calculator. There comes a point where you can use a calculator when you're dealing with very complex math, but that means that you have a very firm understanding of a whole bunch of other concepts, and you're at the point where you're allowed to bring a calculator into calculus. But that's because you have such a foundational understanding. Now this is just a tool to help you figure out the answer for a very complex equation. And I think that's the same with AI. If you have the fundamental understanding that you need, that you are already extraordinarily competent, AI can be a tool to help you to get to maybe some deeper understanding, maybe to help with some editing, things like that. And in that way, as a tool, it can be very useful. But that is to a person who is not a 14-year-old. It's to somebody who already went through all the rigor. They have already written essays. They are a competent writer. And now this is an AI as a research assistant. Sort of like having an assistant saying, hey, can you help me if I'm looking up statutes? It's a quicker way to get all the statutes so that you can analyze them. But if you don't know what a statute even is, and you don't have any understanding, it will give you an answer, but you won't really know. You don't really understand. You're just saying a thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's the difference between an expert doing a job and a kid learning. The kids aren't experts doing a job. They are engaged. Their job right now is learning. There's always some TEDx speaker or some, accomplished mathematician who will say, well, I, as an MIT mathematician, what does real math look like for me? It's not sitting around doing flashcards. It's engaging and doing work with math, or a physicist. It's using math to help me solve problems. And that's what we need to do in the classroom. And I want to grab them and shake them and be like, you can do that because you memorized your math facts as a kid, right?
Yes.
If you get to a college level math course and you're like, wait, 8 times 7, hold on. Like, you can't do the more complex math because your brain space, your bandwidth is so busy doing the basic math that you can't do the calculus or linear. I don't know what's more advanced than calculus. So it's the same thing with kids where they need to master the basics before we give them the more complex tools.
Yes. And these calculators in these scenarios don't give the kids the answer. Your kid could still get an F on the paper. Like, it's just a tool to help them. You know, I'm not it's been a while since I've taken calculus, but it was a tool that was necessary to kind of get through a complex problem, but it didn't give them the answer. Now it would if for a third grader going through their multiplication tables, but that's why they can't. That's why a calculator is only something that they can use when their test is done and if they want to check their work. That's the way you use it. And it's the same. AI has got to be sort of like this tool off to the side to be used by, and you just can't, kids just can't handle it. It's like if you gave a kid a calculator, set it right next to them on a desk, and they're in second grade or third grade, and no one's watching, and you say, honor system, you can't use that calculator. I mean, most kids will every once in a while try to like, ooh, let me, no, can that's just because they're kids, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. So we can't have on their desk, here you go, you have the access, just honor system, don't use it, don't use this tool. When they are better, when they know more about this stuff than we do, let's be honest, these kids are often more, we're all not, you know, IT workers, and they're all about to lose their jobs to AI. They created the thing that's now going to send them packing, which is kind of sad. When I just saw that the Twitter creator, what's his name? He's firing 3,000 or 4,000 people.
Oh, wow. Jack Dorsey.
Yeah, he's like, AI can do your job now.
Oh my gosh.
It's scary out there.
Yeah. The other thing is, to use AI well, you need to know something. To prompt it well, you need to be able to write well. To, you know, pursue interesting lines of thought, like somebody who's researching education or medicine, like you have to know something about the topic before you can pursue an interesting line of inquiry using it. And even like you can, I never use AI in my work. For the first time, I started experimenting with it and then decided not to, because I was using it to help me, very nerdy, analyze Title II of the Higher Education Act. And I fed it Title II and was kind of asking some questions about it. What would be constitutional to do this versus that? Trying to pick through some things. One, I didn't like that I was doing that because again, it was, instead of sitting and thinking, oh man, is this gonna, what other statute is this gonna run up against? Let me go investigate that. Like, I'm not doing the work and also learning through that process. I'm not contacting, you know, it might be, normally that'd be a call that I make to a colleague that knows more about the Higher Education Act. Like, hey, can you got like 15 minutes? Can we talk through this? So I'm losing that interpersonal connection. And the other thing, I'm glad that I have background knowledge and some factual knowledge about education policy, because I started to realize, like, wait, I don't think that's right. And I found it was just spitting out errors and hallucinations.
Yes.
So if the kids don't know something, if they don't have that background education, they're not going to be able to sniff out the errors that are inherent to AI.
Yes, there's a lot of issues with that right now, and I know they say they'll be corrected, but I think that there's, for all the reasons you said, the investigation, the research, thinking on your own, sitting back and then trying to write and working through these things, calling colleagues, calling people, looking things up. All of those things are still good for us. But you're correct that if you don't prompt well, you're not going to get an answer. And also you're going to have to feed it a whole bunch of information for it to decipher. It doesn't already have that information. So I think AI in education is going to be a very big deal. And so to Moms for Liberty, we've just developed an AI toolkit, and we're trying to sound the alarm, because I think it's going to be the next very big deal that we are working through in education. I know you sounded the alarm a lot sooner. I didn't understand. I still don't fully understand everything that's going on, but I'm concerned when there are articles like recently that there is, I'm pulling up, that new AI homework agent will do assignments for students even while they sleep. And this was supposed to, it's called Einstein, and actually this was kind of like, oh, what a great idea. I don't think that's a really great idea.
How's that a good idea? Like you don't
They're
learn the material unless you work through the material.
That company sure is promoting it like, isn't this great? I don't think that's so great, because what are
No.
your kids learning?
Yeah, how you don't, to get into a basic cognitive science here, you remember what you think about. So if you're like, yeah, homework is boring, writing an essay is hard, but it's cognitive work that then makes it stick in your memory. Just like working out is hard, but that's what builds muscle. If the kids aren't thinking about their homework, if they're not writing the essay, if they're not struggling through the hard book, the old language of the Declaration of Independence, they don't learn. They don't get better at reading. They don't learn the information. Like,
Yeah, they're not gonna have to read Shakespeare. They can just simply just put a prompt in and say, like, give me the summary.
yeah,
But yeah, they go to sleep, they do a bunch of prompts, they press send and go to sleep, and when they wake up, they've got an essay or they've got their homework done.
yeah,
That's not a good idea. And I think you made the point, I believe it was you, on X, that there's going to be a bigger divide between the haves and have-nots, because people with means are not going to let their kids get dumber and dumber and dumber. They're going to provide classical education. They're going to make sure that their kids can think. But
yeah,
poor kids, kids from a two-parent working class family, that they don't have the means or the time to sift through all of this, they're the ones that are going to end up functionally illiterate.
yeah. That's a prediction. I have no data to prove that. No evidence to prove that. So this is purely, we're in hunch territory. But I have a
Mhm.
hunch that we're going to see a divide in education, just kind of summarizing what you already said of my summary, that the affluent parents are going to see, they're going to have kind of the knowledge of the effects of these screens, and sign them up for no tech schools. Either get them into a classical school, which takes, it takes a lot of extra effort to get your kid into a charter school, or pay for tuition to get them into a no screen school. I mean, that's what all of these tech CEOs already do, right? The
They
tech
do.
CEOs do not send their kids to tech schools. They send their kids to no tech schools. The tech CEOs don't give their kids unmitigated access to screens. They don't buy their kids a smartphone until they're 17 and limit their screen time to an hour a week. I don't remember the tech CEO who was
I was going to point that
being
out.
interviewed, but there's a tech CEO that like blew everyone's mind. Like, how much do you allow your teenage daughter to use the screen? And he said an hour a week. A week. That's 10 minutes a day. So
With all this Hollywood stars, their kids,
mhm,
they will say their kids aren't allowed to watch the movies that they're in. Their kids don't have. Look, there was a article with a big star. What's his name? I can't believe it. He's the
Matthew
blonde.
McConaughey.
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey. And
Uh-huh.
for his son's 17th birthday, he's like, "I'm giving you a phone." And this is the 17th. You know why? Because he is in this business. He understands how toxic our culture is,
Yeah.
and he's raising his kids like on a ranch, no screens.
Yep.
I mean, they know how
Yeah.
toxic this culture can be for young kids, and they've probably seen a lot of shocking things with young kids in the business, and they're trying to shield their kids from it as long as they
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. So we'll get these bougie schools with no screens, and then all the public schools. Uh, Administrators love to sell themselves as the innovator, always want to do the latest thing, and tech is always the great way for them to get kind of to get support and publicity and be the go-getter. So they're going to buy the latest thing. They're going to spend gobs of their district money, on AI software, more screens that are just going to get broken, and you're going to have kids at public schools just lobotomized by screens from day to day. And I think that's the divide that we're going to start to see.
And you as a former administrator know, imagine how unburdened they would be if they could get rid of more teachers and not have to pay pension plans and not have to pay health insurance. The biggest part of a school budget is how much they have to pay.
Payroll and pensions.
Payroll, pensions. It's the huge pie. And
Yeah.
the administrators don't want to lose a job, but they're okay with firing, making that there's very few specialists anymore. There's one math specialist in our district that has to go through all the schools for elementary, just one. And there used to be one in every building. And imagine if they could just get rid of that position altogether and have an AI tutor that the kids go to. They'll love that.
Yeah, all the incentives, unfortunately, are pushing towards tech. So I'm over here like, let's teach them cursive again. Bring back pencils. But I admit, I think I'm going to lose this argument.
There's a balance, though. So I think what has to be found is you're like, I think in the grand scheme of things, but there could be that we're going to go back to teaching. The kids are going to have to write up until 5th grade, at least. We're going to teach them, they're going to have penmanship, they're going to have cursive, and we're going to delay introducing them to some of this technology. Yeah. And even if we do have it in elementary, they're going to have to meet some standards and do some things. Good schools will do that. Good schools will do that, hopefully.
And I think there's something to be said about that. I was listening to one of my other colleagues, Christine Rosen. She's at AEI, was talking about, just pulled up my wallet. She, with her kids' allowance, still gives them paper money because we are physical beings. So we understand things like we have to touch and grab them to some extent. Obviously, we can do abstract thinking, but if kids don't have physical money, they never gain a sense of like, if I spend the dollar, I don't have the dollar anymore. If it's all on a debit card or Venmo, it's just poof, it's gone. And you don't really get a sense for that. That, we as adults, even if we use debit cards, we still remember growing up that you had the piggy bank or the stash of dollar bills where you'd go and then buy candy from Walgreens or whatever it was. But I think that's the same thing where we need them to shape letters out and handwrite and feel a book and pick up a newspaper or a magazine and just understand physical knowledge to some extent. And eventually, yes, the world is online now, and they're going to have to learn to use Google Docs and learn how to write emails. But let's teach them how to write on paper and then introduce them to the digital world. Let's not just stick a kindergartner in front of a ChatGPT and hope for the best.
And what do you think about the future of education when AI can do a lot of things that humans were hired to do? Do you think, there'll be new, I'm not a doomsdayer. Will evolve, there'll be new things, but do you think that schools are finally going to reinforce some of the trades, some skilled? I know that there's this kind of friction. I was just talking to someone who in their school district, they feel that their administrators look down on trade programs and they're trying to get rid of them at a time where I think, hey, this is something we're going to need more than ever, because these are things that humans do and do well. Yet we've undervalued them as a society. We undervalue them, and it's like, no, you want to work for Google? Well, guess what? Google's not hiring; they're firing. Yeah.
I'm going to continue to come back to my old school education beats talking points here, but what we try and teach the kids, if we're trying to prepare them for the future of tomorrow, whatever we teach the 8th grader today is going to be useless by the time they're 20 years old, right? The technology will have advanced. So if we're trying to teach them the tech of the future, well, we don't have the tech of the future. So like it's going to be, man, what is the word that I'm looking for? Not out of date. Anyways, it's going to be out of date by the time they become adults. But some things are timeless.
Yes.
Like knowing how to fix your kitchen sink is timeless. Being able to fix somebody's car or like just know how to tinker with mechanics is timeless. You know what else is timeless? Parting is such sweet sorrow that we must bid goodnight till it be morrow. Like the pain of saying goodbye to a loved one until you see them again. That's timeless. The lessons of ambition gone wrong that we get from Macbeth, that's timeless. I want to focus not on the innovation of the latest thing in schools. I want to teach kids timeless things. Our Declaration of Independence is timeless. The insights of our founders are timeless. So I'm a little skeptical of trying to innovate in education. I'm also a fan of school choice, which is where I think like you can then, I want to have kind of a solid grounding K-8 more. I think there's something to be said about it, a systematized education K-8, right? Kids got to learn how to read, kids got to learn how to do math. There's some basic science that they should know, but especially once you get to high school, like why not send a kid to a trade school or an art school or a classical school? Like not everyone wants to be a plumber. Not everyone wants to be an academic. Like especially at the high school level, let 1,000 flowers and options bloom.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that because I think that over the last 10 years, there's been such a focus on kids should learn, like the best jobs are going to be these white collar jobs in tech, the tech industry. And that is not the case. So I think we do need to focus, not just focus, trades, but also on the beautiful, like like make great thinkers, great writers again. And I think we've kind of crushed that a little bit over the last 10 years with this obsession with technology. And now I hope that a lot of people are waking up to the fact that that's robbed us, that's like hurt our souls in some ways. And we need to get back to, like what you said, to art, literature, writing again, reading, thinking, articulating. And then from there, your kids can decide. But if they are good writers, if they are thinkers, if they are creative, that is special. That is a skill that is, right now it's disappearing too fast. And so I know that's what I focused on with my kids. And I think that the schools need to focus on that more and more. And hopefully that's the direction that they're going. But finally, I know we've talked for a while now, but despite all that we're talking about, and that the schools that do this best are choice schools, they are charter schools, they are classical schools. These are the schools that the big unions like the NEA and all of the interests, like in Wisconsin, the big Education Inc., they try to crush. They want to crush it any means possible. And they want more and more money, even though they have a declining enrollment. They want more money, even though AI is taking jobs, more money. So what are your thoughts on that as we end?
I think some of it comes back to the tough love conversation that we were talking about earlier. Instead of tough love, I will talk about like eat your spinach policies. A lot of people don't like eat your spinach policies. Declining enrollment is a great example. It doesn't have to do with kids. Some of it does. The main reason enrollment is declining in schools isn't like people fleeing from woke public schools. It's a declining birth rate. People are having fewer kids. You go back 40 or 50 years and on surveys, the ideal family, the average answer was 4 kids. Nowadays on surveys, when we ask people, what's the ideal number of children? It's 2. Our birth rate, at least among native-born Americans, is below replacement level. So the average family is having less than 2 kids, fewer than 2 children. So just people are having fewer children, and that means fewer students enrolled in schools. So you have schools in Chicago, next to me, and where I am. I'm not going to say the name of the city because I don't want people finding where I live. but there are schools that are half empty. So the eat your spinach policy I'm talking about is closing schools, is firing staff, is the budget restrictions. Like that's eat your spinach kind of stuff. But no one likes that, right? It's why everyone's in debt, because no one wants to say no to the vacation. No one wants to say no to the fancy car. Responsible stewardship of institutions requires things that people don't like doing. So what are and somebody who, a school board member or state superintendent, who's going out there and saying enrollment's down, we need to cut, like if we want these buildings to function or these districts to function, we need to close schools and fire staff. That's true. I'm sorry, that's just true,
Yeah.
but it's not going to get them elected.
Increase class size. They don't want to do that.
Yeah, nope. And it's not going to get them elected either, because it's not a nice political talking point. What is a nice political talking point? Give more money to schools.
Yeah.
More money. What's your solution? More money. If there's the political saying that if you're explaining, you're losing, it takes a second to explain why schools don't need money. It takes a second to explain, right? It took me 3 minutes to explain why do we need to close school buildings. But hey, schools need more money. Don't you want your kid to have the latest textbook? Oh, yeah, they do. Most people on their Saturdays, right? They want to go grill. They want to go do yard work. They're not reading the nuts and bolts of education policy. I don't blame them for this, but that makes these political talking points that are simple, intuitive, and wrong easy to sell. Whereas the more complex, realistic, difficult, uncomfortable answers don't.
And they're convinced, like they are told smaller class sizes. We need smaller class sizes. And you've written that no, you don't. You don't actually need. And I know Thomas Sowell has. I've read about. He's talked at length about that. The class size didn't matter. What mattered was the expectations and the competence, and the fact that in the classroom the teachers had control of it. They could discipline kids that were unruly, which they can't. That's another big issue. It seems like the real problems aren't getting solved. They don't even want to talk about them, and they come up with solutions that just pad their budget. They don't work. And they just always want the newfangled, the new shiny toy that they can spend a lot of money on. And they're because after someone is a superintendent, lots of times they end up they work for some education organization, and they're selling a product back to the school. It's all kind of it's a bro fest going on.
Yeah. It's more of the same and expecting different results.
Yeah, just like in politics. So there's a lot of money in education. I think if people they may think they know, but they don't know. There is a lot of money in education.
$36,000 per student in New York. Imagine how many kids did you say you have?
5.
5. Imagine if you just got a check from the government for 36,000 times 5. What is that? 150,000, 160,000.
For less than that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The bougiest school in my area doesn't charge that much per student.
Yeah, it's the same. And there'd be change left over. There'd be money left over. That's insane. That's insane.
People don't realize just how much we spend on education.
They don't.
It is more than every other developed country in the world, except for one small tiny nation that no one's ever heard of. We're like the number 2 spender.
Because it's become political. And that's why it's so hard to dismantle it, because there's so many political interests that are, they say that they're not political, but when Becky Pringle is like pretty much like I in a Baptist church, she could be a Baptist minister the way she just kind of like, oh my gosh, but she's a professional. She is in charge of the largest public sector union in this country. comprised of educators, and they have a federal charter. And she is so openly political that they put out materials that say teaching is political.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
yet here we are. If you
Yeah.
try to defund, or you try to say something about their obsession with crushing classical schools and charter schools, you hate kids, you hate teachers,
Yeah.
you're just a knuckle dragger that doesn't
It's
care
like
about education.
you can't see the 1-year-old right now walking into my office bringing me a bag of chips
Oh,
with
well,
one
that's a symbol. That's time to go. Well, thanks.
with chipmunk cheeks full of his own snacks.
Oh, I miss it. Those are great times. But
Yeah,
well,
they
thank
are.
you, Daniel. Like, there's so many things to talk about whenever we have a chance to talk. There's a million other things, because it's just such a huge topic. But
Yeah.
thank you for coming on. I think we were able to talk through some things, and I will put some of the articles in comments so people can access them themselves. And I want everyone to be aware, and I will also put that in the comments, that you are going to be part of a webinar, and it's on your X page. It's
Mhm.
Upstream Activism, How Colleges Shape K through 12 Classrooms. And I'll be signing up for that. So that's coming up soon. And that's a free webinar, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, March 4th. So
Mhm.
if you're all interested, I'm going to put that in the comments. So please tune in. So thank you, Daniel, so much. This has been a great talk for an hour and a half. Wow.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a blast. Thanks for having
Yes.
me on.
Have a great weekend. Enjoy time with your family.
I will. You too.
Bye. That was a great discussion with Daniel Buck. So much. I didn't even get to everything, not even close, actually. Like, we just started talking about so many things. But since we talked a lot about AI, I do want to bring up the AI toolkit that is offered by Moms for Liberty. So, as part of the First Lady Melania Trump's White House task force on AI education, Moms for Liberty has signed the AI Education Pledge, committing to help shape expectations for the responsible advancement of AI in American education. And this agreement includes a commitment to develop tools and resources that empower parents to support innovation in AI education, while ensuring that children are protected and parental rights are upheld. And basically, this campaign is calling for citizens and policymakers to unite on safety guardrails for artificial intelligence and its use in K through 12 schools, because we need to protect children, and we also need to make sure that they are getting properly educated. And as Daniel and I discussed, there are a lot of problematic areas. I mean, we already struggle so much with technology in schools, technology in our homes, and as AI is just expanding so rapidly, I think it's growing faster than we are keeping up with it. I'm reminded, I was going to say this to Daniel, but I'm reminded of the quote from Jurassic Park, that we're so busy asking, can we build this? We're not stopping to consider, should we? And I think there are things happening that we won't know the consequences of until many years down the road. As Dan and I discussed, when smartphones first came out, these little iPads first came out, it was great. Like, there were all sorts of learning apps. Kids, you could download and they could watch a show while, you're going on a long car ride, and then your 5-year-old and your 7-year-old aren't fighting. They can just watch, just a Disney show. And this is great. This is great technology. These screens are great. Then these things were happening, and I know I didn't fully understand all of these apps and these social media apps. These early ones were forming, and our kids were communicating and they had lots of accounts, lots of different names, and there was a lot of things going on, a lot of things that they were exposed to that we didn't know. And we also, even if the content was all appropriate, even if the content that they are exposed to is age appropriate, the studies are coming out to say that this constant stream of screen time and short videos and just constantly looking at a screen and not touching grass, well, it's having some devastating effects on our kids. Some of them are just as, they're maybe you wouldn't say some too dramatic, but they're just not able to retain information. They're not able to concentrate as well. They're having more trouble sleeping, and they're not developing the way that humans have over thousands of years. And so there's some alarm bells. The canary is singing in the coal mine, and we need to listen. So the AI resources that we have provided are based on our core principles that parents have a fundamental right to direct their children's education, that AI must never replace teachers in core instruction or grading, and that we believe direct instruction is best. And the research is showing that. I know for the last 20 years, parents have been told, oh, direct instruction, oh, that's old timey. You need to get with the program. Well, I'm looking right now, they are now proving that direct instruction is the best for students, and that the teacher guiding that instruction, it works best for students. Not setting them up with a cohort where they can self-learn. I know that's a popular concept, or setting up an AI assistant that's now going to teach them. I think the direct instruction is best, and now the research is coming out that is what's worked. That's what works best for kids, and we should be trying to emulate it as much as possible. Student data belongs to students and parents, not schools and not vendors. Student data should not be sold off to vendors, and that is happening. Our kids should not be data mined. That's wrong, absolutely wrong. AI must not be used for social emotional learning, psychological profiling, or mental health services for many reasons. And transparency and accountability are essential when emerging technologies involve minors, meaning parents have a seat at the table always. They are aware of what's going on, they are involved, and they are providing their consent. Our message is simple. Technology serves families. And as Tina Deskovich, the Moms for Liberty CEO, has said, our children will be raised by parents, not algorithms. So these resources are available, and I'm going to put some of these on the screen so that you can see them. And here's where you can find those resources. You can see right here that we have a video right here, YouTube, and then some of the information that I had discussed. You can sign up to sign the Safety in AI Education Pledge today. Then we have a resource library where we have many toolkits, including the AI toolkit. And there you go. And so when you scroll down, you can see we have AI state legislature model policy, we have AI school board model policy, and we have AI school board proclamation. And there's sample speeches, there's all sorts of resources that you can provide to your administrators, to other teachers, and even to your school board members in your school district. And then there is a whole lot of information here, and important resources. You also can follow us on social media. On X, we are always posting articles and the thought leaders in education. We, just everything. Some of the current news, what's going on in culture. Like I just recently posted some of the lot on the USA men's hockey team and patriotism. And so that's been fun. We like to post things that are happy, but we also have to kind of post some of the things that are not so great that are happening in education and in culture and that families are dealing with. I also want to point out some of the articles that we discussed today with Daniel Buck. One, Teachers as Cultural Stewards. This is in National Affairs. And it's a really, really good article. I wanted to talk about this more, but we briefly touched on the critical pedagogy, and I wanted to discuss Paulo Freire a little bit, but we can do this now. Basically, critical pedagogy was born of Brazilian Marxist named Paulo Freire, and Pedagogy of the Oppressed, a book written in 1968 and praised by Mao Zedong, China's brutal dictator, is one of the most assigned books to prospective teachers in university schools of education, and the third most cited book in all of social sciences. Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And the fundamental premise of this critical pedagogy is that schools exist to overthrow the West. Yes, to overthrow Western civilization, its oppressive capitalist structure. And Freire mapped the oppressor-oppressed dichotomy of Marxism onto the teacher-student relationship. He denigrated traditional instruction, direct instruction, as banking education. He spelled out the supposed deficiencies of banking education. The teacher teaches, the students are taught, the teacher talks, the students listen, the teacher chooses the program content, and the students adapt to it. His disruptive pedagogy would mean in practice, or in praxis, as they like to say, Freire remained mute. His most practical, he recommended that teachers in agrarian rural communities inform students of their poverty. Notice, so this is what he said to do in Brazil back in the 60s. Look at how we're doing this now, right? He recommended teachers, again, do that, expose students of their poverty, discussing pictures of peasants working in the fields in order to foster revolutionary sentiments. He credited the Cuban revolutionary Che Guevara as an example of a loving teacher, and the Maoist cultural revolution that was responsible for the death of over 20 million souls as his loving philosophy put into action. Freire inspired many disciples, primarily among them Gloria Watkins or Bell Hooks, whose books still make the New York Times bestsellers list. One of them, Teaching to Transgress, captured her ideological regime. Teachers ought to encourage the transgression of all oppressive barriers, including family structures, gender norms, and classroom expectations. She saw learning as revolution. Education primarily must foster criticism and subsequent destruction of societal structures. So when you ask why are they talking about transgenderism in kindergarten? Why is Michigan intent on providing to children age inappropriate materials that border on pornography? Why? Why would they do that to little kids? It's almost so horrible that we can't even believe it's happening. That's why it's always said, oh, they're lying, until you prove. And then, oh, well, that's not true. We're actually doing something different. And then you prove, no, this is what you're doing. These are the materials you're showing. Then it's shut up, you bigot. This is good for them. And you're just a bigoted, bad person. And you need to go away. They're our kids now. They're not your kids. And that's the way it always goes. Starts with denial. Then, yeah, but we're doing these things, but not what you're saying. It's not, we're doing something different. Then you prove that they're doing exactly what you said they were, and suddenly it's like, yep, we are. Celebrate us or be canceled. And that's wrong. Absolutely wrong. So when discussing how these programs, these pedagogies look in practice, it's always, I think my friend James Lindsay said, it's always yada, 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 blah, 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 and then beautiful nirvana. They never can quite connect A to B. They can never reach concrete applications of their thoughts. It's like what Daniel Buck writes, it's like asking fish to fly. With deconstruction as their only tool, they only know how to take things apart. They don't know how to build good things. They know how to take things apart. They know how to build activist movements. They know how to organize for revolution. But when that's done, after they've deconstructed, they have no idea how to build. And therein lies a very, very big problem. They only critique. That's their only tool. They offer no positive vision. They cannot replace what they tear down. Just look at what ends up happening after every socialist, Marxist revolution, whether it's a revolution, physical war, or it's like what's been happening in our country, a cultural revolution, a color revolution. In its wake is complete disaster and destruction. They break the norms down. They deconstruct. They struggle, families, kids end up looking at their parents as oppressors, and these broken kids end up living very lives of poverty, and they're just broken, and there's no solutions. When educational Marxists have razed everything traditional to the ground, there will be no knowledge, no skill, no vision left to build something in its stead. Thomas Sowell calls it the vision of the anointed. It's really a vision that lacks any concrete plan. It's a vision. It's a religion. It's an experience, but it's not real. It's not real. Their promotion of critical thinking places critical in bold, I'm reading from Daniel Buck's article, and minimizes thinking. He says, if our schools have strayed from their primary duty of transmitting knowledge to students, it's because of the activist leaders of American education and their deliberate, distorted role they have projected onto teachers. And that's why his article is about the real issues. They start in college, in the universities, the teachers, well, the students that go to college to become teachers, they are thoroughly captured by this ideology. If they've already had a head start now, because this ideological capture is now elementary, middle, high school. But if these students have managed to evade all of that, probably due to the work of parents like us, where we have put so much time and effort and thought into raising our kids, to sharing our values, to providing them the best education possible. Well, then we send them off to university and college, where the whole goal is to deconstruct all of that and to make them into good little Marxist educators who will view teaching as a political act, and one that will help to push forward this revolution, this wonderful, glorious day where the West, meaning America, will finally fall. That is the goal. That is the why. From its origins as Marxist thought experiments, critical pedagogy has come to dominate what revered emeritus professor of education, E.D. Hirsch, I love him, calls the educational thought world. The primary beliefs of the sector that manifest in curricula and book lists, passing slogans, platitudes, assume wisdom, and unquestionable dogmas. It's cultural literacy. I love that book. It was extremely controversial, and I defended it when I was in college. And back then, progressives absolutely just were throwing a fit about cultural literacy, claiming that it was racist, it was bad, it was focused on Western culture, Western ideals, and therefore it was not back then multicultural enough. Multicultural was the word used back then. And so Daniel goes on to talk about the pedagogy in these schools of education and teacher prep program. They're, instead of works of classical philosophy, they are providing tools of critical pedagogy. Hence, Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida is now providing $3,000 grants to teachers that go through classes provided by Hillsdale in classical education, that they learn the classics, and they will get a $3,000 bonus once they complete this coursework. I think it's amazing. I think it's exactly the kind of things we need to be doing. A national program like that would be amazing, but I think every state that can possibly pass a similar program, they have a governor willing to pass it, they have a state legislature that's willing to write that legislation, and you've got a state department of education that's going to help to implement it. I think, great, do it now, do it as fast as you can. Copy, emulate the program that Governor DeSantis is doing in Florida, because if our teachers don't understand classical education, if they don't have some sort of background in the classics and in the American government, in this whole experiment that we're about to celebrate 250 years of, then it's pretty difficult for them to impart that wisdom onto our children in the classroom. So let's start by providing this kind of work for our educators so that they are thoroughly grounded in the anti-woke work that they need to do. So, I mean, I'm sure you've heard Ibram X. Kendi, Harvard Graduate School of Education, offering courses on queering education for aspiring educators to integrate the gender, to basically deconstruct the gender binary and introduce gender fluidity and the 137 different gender identities. So even public universities in conservative states, such as the University of Utah, they offer courses on critical pedagogy. States like Texas loosen credentialing and licensing laws, but the National Center for Education Statistics still reports that almost 80% of teachers still attend preparation programs at universities. And this is, I'm going to quote from Daniel, like a catechism class in Catholic schools, Aspiring teachers read from the book of Freire. They recite the shibboleths and adopt this radical philosophy that casts the educator as a revolutionary. So this is a wonderful read and provides so much insight. So I strongly, strongly suggest that if you're interested in this topics and if you would like to understand how education has gone off the rails, why is there such a focus on radicalism? Why aren't kids learning phonics and the building blocks of reading in classrooms, and why instead are they focused on very ideological content? Well, this is why, because if in college, as they're training in their prep programs, then after they have their degree, if all of the coursework that they have to take to retain their licensure, if it all revolves around this pedagogy of the oppressed, this oppressed dynamic, that forget teaching kids about the history of America in a way that is factual, in a way that is fair. It's more important to teach them to hate America, because you need to break them down. You need to disrupt what their parents are teaching them. You need to disrupt what they're learning in Sunday school. You need to get to them younger, and in order to have the revolutionaries that are needed to finally overthrow the West, which is the goal, which is the stated goal of these philosophers and these writers of all of this critical pedagogy. They've got to get a stronger majority, and then they can take down the West without ever firing a shot. They can basically have the public just willingly surrender their rights, surrender their freedoms, surrender their liberty, surrender their speech, surrender their property, surrender their children, surrender all to Big Sister. Big Sister will take care of them, right? Well, wrong, because at the end of this transgender rainbow, there is no pot of gold. There are no solutions. There is no plan. There's only deconstruction, and there is only disaster in the wake. And that's why we fight. That's why we fight. So if you are interested in learning more about Daniel Buck, please follow him. Here is his X handle, at Mr. Daniel Buck. And if you go to his X page, you will find links to his articles, and you will find a wealth of resources there. And then do not forget that and you go to his X page, you're going to see that he is going to be part of an event put on by NAVI, N-A-V-I, on March 4th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 p.m. Central. It is a free webinar that will discuss some of the topics that we were just discussing right now, how teachers, colleges shape K-12 classrooms. This is a really important discussion about how teacher preparation programs have reshaped professional norms, instructional frameworks, and the purpose of the classroom. So panelists like Daniel Buck will discuss why meaningful reform must begin in the schools of education. And I think that's something very important in a time such as this, a message that we need to share with our elected leaders, with congressmen, with the Trump administration, the Department of Education, and in our states, because most of these requirements, if not the vast, vast majority, come from the state level. So this kind of reform is something that we need to do in a state-by-state basis. And I know in some areas it's going to be harder than others, but at least bringing awareness might mean that there are private colleges, private classical colleges, private Christian colleges, just smaller colleges they could start to implement some changes in their programs, at least providing options for young people that do want to go into education, but they don't want to be indoctrinated. And even for those who can resist all of this, it really sucks. It sucks to go to class every day and have to ingest all of this insanity. Take it from me. I know I sit through a lot of the teacher prep trainings that are offered to educators as continuing education and they're provided for by the state using state funds. Anyone can attend them. So you should look to see what's happening in your state. And so you can sign on and you can join the webinars as a tax-paying citizen of your state. And it would absolutely shock you. It would shock you what they will put out for everyone to see. They don't even care. They don't even hide it. I am going to start to post some of that material. So if you follow us on X, you're going to see it. It's so much. There's so much content. I could just run it on a 24-hour live stream, which maybe I should sometime. Maybe I should just run one of these on a 24 live, on just a long live stream, because these are all day, just so you can see. You could see the insanity. That's an idea. Put a pin in that. But you should follow us on X. Hurry up and find our right here. So at moms4liberty. So look, scrolling right there. Follow us on X. And you can also please go to our YouTube channel and like and subscribe. It is really hard to grow our YouTube channel. They say YouTube is primarily male dominated, and we are Moms for Liberty, but I think we have a lot of dads and grandpas and sane people that are interested in what we're doing. So please just subscribe, like and subscribe at Moms4Liberty. That would be greatly appreciated. And I want to again, let's see, go to, you can join Moms for Liberty at momsforliberty.org. Click down there, see? And also that is where you could find our toolkits and the AI toolkit among them. So just go to moms4liberty.org. So we're coming up on 2 hours. That was time flies when you're learning. So thank you all for tuning in. I hope this has been insightful for you. These are conversations that are being had. They're all over. And AI has many great benefits. There are some really cool things that we will, tools that we have, but there's, great responsibility. There's a great responsibility that we have to our children to make sure that tech and AI that they experience that in very small doses that are age appropriate. And at some developmental points in their learning, not at all. That they do not have access to screens at a very young age. That that parents are watching over. And yes, being strict parent. You're not going to be the permissive parent. You're going to be the parent that loves their kid enough to say no, to create boundaries, knowing that they will be better off for those boundaries and they will thank you. They will thank you one day for providing them. So with that, have a good day and come back soon. Bye now.
Parents, you must always hold the keys to the AI toolbox. AI is already in classrooms across the country. Millions of teachers are using AI in various ways. They use it to grade papers and to streamline their workload. They use it to create individual learning plans for students. And students are already using AI too. They're using it for research in the classroom, and some are using it to create new technology and use it in innovative ways to advance their learning. It's really exciting to see what's happening. Truly, there's also a downside to having AI in the classroom without any guardrails. We hear stories in the news already across the country, and parents are testifying that this is happening.
Parents who say character AI is also pushing dangerous content to kids, and at times acting like a digital predator.
These companies knew exactly what they were doing. They designed chatbots to blur the lines between human and machine.
1 in 5 high school students reported that they or someone they know has had a romantic relationship with AI.
Researchers found the bear openly discussed sexually explicit and dangerous content with kids.
The other problem that we're seeing with AI is it's not always true.
Sometimes AI can tell you what you want to hear, not necessarily what is true.
It's not helpful when students just use it to directly cheat.
Parents have to understand the algorithms that are basically set up to direct our children to look at certain things, feel certain things, and believe certain things. That's the role of a parent, not an algorithm.
We are living in a moment of wonder, and it is our responsibility to prepare children in America.
Moms for Liberty is leading the charge on unifying, educating, and empowering parents to understand AI and how it's impacting our children. We're already doing this by joining the AI and Education Task Force under the leadership of First Lady Melania Trump. I've personally attended 2 meetings at the White House on this. I've spoken to members of the cabinet about the guardrails that need to be put in place to protect our children. Because we understand the importance of empowering you to protect all children, we've created model policy that you can download and take directly to your school board and ask them to adopt. We've created school board speeches that you can change and modify for yourself and use to speak to your school board in a public forum. We've created draft policy for the state level that you can go meet with your state legislators and ask them to sponsor the bill and start moving it through the process so that all the children in your state will be protected.